My guest for this episode is Marvin Liao. He's an investor, operator, board member, executive coach, and formal advisor to several large family offices. He spent 6 years as a partner with the venture capital fund 500 Startups. He has invested in over 414 early-stage startups around the world. He shares his advice for investors, founders, and everyone who experienced 2020 as a bit of a wake-up call. This is Invincible Career, and I'm Larry Cornett. So welcome to the show, Marvin. It's great to see you again after 11 years, 10 years. It's been a long time.
Probably 10 years. I think 10 years probably.
How does a decade go by? It's like, seems just like yesterday. We were in Barcelona having dinner, and I think that's the last time I saw you in person.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I just think time flies when you're having fun and getting old, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like valley time, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I see you online a lot. You're very active. And so I feel like I've been keeping up with your life, but
Vice
probably
versa.
some folks listening don't know everything about you. So let's start with a little bit about who you are and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, sure. So who I am. So I've done a bunch of stuff. So I've been a Silicon Valley guy now 22 years. I've been in San Francisco this long. Did the startup stuff for a couple of years. Then was a big tech exec like Larry. That's where we met.
Right.
After Yahoo, I actually took a 2-year sabbatical. So I just kind of did the
Nice.
angel investing boards, observatory boards. And that was incredible. That was really, really good. And then I ended up being a VC early stage investor running being a partner at 500 Startups. So it was an early stage VC fund and accelerator, and end up, starting their San Francisco office and doing a lot of investments and traveling the world and doing all this stuff for about 6 years. So I did that from 2014 to 2019. Crazy ride. Mainly good. I would say mostly good, but crazy ride.
Yeah.
And left end of 2019. So I think my last day was official, I think like Jan 1st, 2020. And last year was sort of meant to be my sabbatical year, just more of the boards, observatory boards, and doing the conference circuit stuff. And COVID happened, and that kind of wrecked everything. And so you kind of had to rethink my life.
Yeah,
and so what I do now, I sit on several boards. I manage my own investment portfolio. And I basically just mentor for fun. I speak a lot of events, and just honestly,
cool.
just trying. And I sit on several investment committees and advisory boards of different VC funds, and so that's kind of what I do. So kind of have my toes still in the business, but more or less kind of on sabbatical and reading and doing a lot of writing, as you know. So just that's
right.
what I do.
Yeah. I follow your Substack. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
The hot new newsletter platform.
Yeah. You're one. Substack's awesome.
So, at Yahoo, you were a sales executive, and that's where we met. And then you took the sabbatical. So what was the transition like into the venture capital world? Because a lot of people, and we can talk more about this, a lot of people dream about this, especially those in product and business. They're like, someday I want to be a VC partner. That's kind of my ultimate dream, is I can be a VC partner and sit on the other side of the table for a change. So what was that transition like?
I mean, honestly, I don't know if there's a lot that people can learn from sort of my experience, because I do think there's never one path into VC, and that path is very accidental. And so the way I got into 500, right? I didn't have any plans to be a VC and to do investing. It was really more on just sort of, I was bored. And so I got to know the 500 team. I was mentoring at almost 24 different startup accelerator programs, just mentoring for free. And I got to know I actually got to know the 500 team really well during that time. So I mentored for almost over a year and a half. And I was just literally spending 10, 15 hours a week, sometimes more, just mentoring the companies. And so I got to know them for a long time. And so when they, so Dave, who's one of the co-founders of 500, I got to know them well. And so basically he asked me to join because we're starting a San Francisco office. We need somebody to sort of help us there. Would you be interested? And so I actually had to think about it. It wasn't instantaneous when I'm just I'm in. I had to sort of is this sort of the path, right? Because as you know, when I was at Yahoo, we met. I was a general manager and sort of commercial director for the MEA region, I believe, during that time. Right. So I ran the P&L, and so my expectation was to sort of jump back into sort of I'll probably be a CRO or COO of some Series A, Series B company. That was where I thought my path, because I'm hey, I'm a pretty decent operator. I think I'm a pretty good operator. This seems like a and so this was very accidental. But
Okay.
like I said, I'm very grateful. Like they gave me the chance because I was an angel investor, and terrible angel investor. I didn't know what I was doing, and to go and ask me, sort of to go join and run the program and also just invest too when I didn't know anything
Right.
about it. But just like I really like the fact that they gave me a chance. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, yeah, I think it's one of those things you don't get educated in and trained in unless you actually kinda just do it through experience and learn the hard way, and I know a lot of folks kinda learn the hard way.
You only learn
So
the hard way. You only learn the hard way. It's just
there's
like
only the hard knocks.
yeah, it's just like you learn from losing your own money. Like I actually
Yeah,
think like just my first, I'm gonna say 70 to 80 deals weren't that good. Like I didn't know what I was
sure.
doing. And most of my successful investments really came in year 2 and year 3.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what were the lessons learned from that? Because a lot of people are doing some kind of lighter angel investment,
Yeah.
and I see some folks doing that. And like you said, I think they're just doing it by kind of relationships. Like somebody reaches out, "Hey, we used to work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
founding this," and I've done that
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you want to put some money into my startup. So what lessons did you learn that helped you shift from that first year of mistakes into being more successful?
I think a lot of it's like sort of like looking at multiple aspects. I think getting better at reading people of just like, are they really doing this for like the real like for the good reasons, or is this like, do they really
Mm-hmm.
understand the space? And so it was probably 60-70% people assessment. And I'm still working on that. That's the hardest part of just like
Sure.
just that's hard. And the rest of it's like really understanding sort of like market stuff, right? Just like, okay,
Right.
does this is this really a big market, or like it looks like a small market, but can this be a big market? I still wrestle. Like these are all things I still wrestle with as an investor. I
Oh,
still
sure.
struggle with it. But it's something that boy, if you don't know, like just total disaster, right? Like total disaster.
Yeah, that's true.
And I still some of the stuff is interesting, but some of the stuff I wrote off like back then, like back in those days, have now done really really well. Of just like what I didn't picture, just like can this person grind it out? And I had a bunch of stuff where I'm just like, wow, like these folks are just total write off. They grind it out, and now just doing super super well, like six
Oh,
years
good.
later on. And so
Wow.
you're just always surprised, right? Just like wow, like I have real admiration for people who are just able to grind it out, and that's hard to figure out. Like that's
It
really hard
is. It
to
is.
figure out.
Yeah, and some of it's just timing too. It's like,
Oh, huge part.
I mean, I had my voice-based startup that was, way back in 2014 or whenever it was, and it was like we tried to grind through for like 3.5, 4 years till we ran out of runway. And it was just like people weren't that comfortable at that point with voice,
Yeah,
sharing voice.
yeah,
And then lo and behold, last year Clubhouse kind of comes
yeah,
out of nowhere and
yeah,
everybody's like, okay, I'm okay with it now. I'm
yeah,
okay
yeah,
with just sharing my
yeah,
voice. It's
yeah.
like, ah, where were you people like 5 years ago?
Timing. Everything's timing. The big part is
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. So let's talk a little bit on the other side of the table
Yeah,
because, you've been on both sides of the table
yeah,
and then you talked with so many founders, like hundreds of founders all over the world, which
yeah,
is kind of amazing.
yeah.
What are the lessons that you learned from that you could give some advice to founders, like common mistakes to avoid or how to work better with investors and that whole
You know,
kind of navigating that relationship?
I will have to say, sort of in the last couple of years, I've been a little bit, I'm very bullish on Silicon Valley, but
Hmm.
I do think there's a little bit too much hype around it, and there's a little bit too much hype around venture capital funding and things where,
Okay.
like there's this view, it's just like you're not a real company unless you raise VC money, and I'm like, that's
Right,
just not
right.
true, and I also think that a lot of founders are just like really understand what you want and why you're doing what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing, and just understand sort of like you can't get half pregnant, where it's just like once you take VC money, like
Right.
there's a path that you go down, and just be
Yeah.
very conscious and intentional. And I've thought a lot about that in my life too, where I'm just like, I don't think I've been intentional about stuff. I think you let
Mm.
your subconscious drive a lot of things, and it's like, is that something you really want, or is that what everyone else is telling you, everyone around you is telling
Right.
you that you
Yeah.
should want and should do? And so I do have some founders who they've raised the VC money and they regret it because like, wow, like
Yeah.
this actually isn't like once you go down the path, right? The rocket ship, right? Like just like the
It
triple,
changes
triple,
everything.
double,
Yeah.
double of just like growth at all costs. Where for most VCs, whether they say it or not, it's like they would rather you like try to go all out to have $1 billion outcome or zero. And it's not in between. We don't
And
care if
do
you
it
get like
quickly.
5x. Yeah, and
Yeah.
do it quickly.
Yeah.
Where it's just like it's just like you have to understand that's the path. And I'm not sure a lot of founders are thinking clearly about sort of like this is a path that
Yeah.
you make that choice, it's very hard to get off that path. And so the biggest thing I tell most founders, like, really understand what you want, where it's like it's fine. Like, I love the term lifestyle business. It's used derogatorily in Silicon Valley, but I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, if you have a business that's paying you $30,000, $40,000 a month or $10,000 a month, that's a damn good
Right.
business. That's a damn
Yeah.
good business doing the
Yeah.
4-hour work week thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've changed my philosophy on that too. Because we raised pretty early and got a seed round and brought on investors,
Yeah,
and we did it to accelerate things,
yeah,
to bring on more engineers,
yeah.
and it changes everything.
Changes
At that
everything.
point, the clock starts ticking, and we had not found our product market fit yet. We'd
Yeah,
heard a lot. I had a prototype and I tested it with people, and there was a lot of verbal, "Oh yeah,"
yeah,
and they were
yeah, yeah,
playing with it, which is very different than when you launch
yeah,
and it's in production. It's like, okay, where is everybody? Why aren't they using it more often? And that whole thing. And it's like I just kept watching the clock tick as the bank account kept going lower and lower, and I had all these engineers to pay, right?
yeah,
And if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't have raised so early. I would have waited until we had a there
yeah,
and said, okay, this is legit. People
yeah,
like it, they want it. If we accelerate it, it's going to be more successful.
yeah,
And instead, we ran out of money. And
yeah.
so, like you said, I think a lot of people chase the raise because it's the thing to do, and it makes you feel like, oh, now it's a real startup.
Exactly, because it's a thing to do. That's what everyone else is doing, and it's like external validation, right? And there's a lot to
Hmm.
sort of like similar to sort of like personal lives. It's just like, are you driven extrinsically or
Yeah, yeah,
intrinsically? And just honestly, like, the folks who are able to really sort of like stick it out are like driven intrinsically. Of just like, no, no, like, I really do need the money. This actually does make sense, and I'm prepared to go all out. Like, a lot of my best friends, like for them, it's either there's no quitting, like, they're building something, right? And you can sort of
sure,
see that. And I think I look back on it when I'm like, wow, like, there was a level of relentlessness now that I'm able to sort of better able to pick out. But there was no quit in these people. Like, they didn't know
right.
everything, but there was no quit in them. And that's just hard to suss out. And I think, are you building it for the right reason? And I think a lot of people are not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned lifestyle business because I remember the same thing, that
Yeah.
that same conversation, and hearing a lot of the kind of derogatory comments like, "Oh, it's just a lifestyle business,"
Yeah. No, I
and it's
hate
kind
that.
of,
I think it's the worst
it
thing.
bugs
It's
me.
so bad. It's so bad. It really bugs me. I think for me, where just like, I look at this very different, where I'm like, I think there's many paths, right? There's many paths to building a startup. There's
Right.
many paths to life in general. And anyone who goes and says this is a one way to do it, for me, it's just like STFU, right? Just like, no, like
Right.
that's not,
Yeah.
like, no. It's just, then you're just a demagogue.
Yeah, yeah, and my business is a lifestyle business, totally. I'm a
Mhm.
solopreneur, and it
Yeah.
supports me and my family,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not probably gonna get a lot bigger than this, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I coach a lot of other people the same way
Yeah.
because I think there is that middle ground. It's like, you know, some people love being an employee
Yeah.
and it works out really well for them, and they like the structure and they like having a
Yeah.
boss and having everything that goes with being in a corporation. Some people want to create the next thing that's going to change the world, and it's going to be a $1 billion company, or it's going to do something amazing like cure cancer. And I know some
Yeah.
folks doing that.
Yeah.
Then there's a bunch of us in the middle. It's like, I don't really like working for someone else. I'm
Yep.
not going to build $1 billion company. I just want to build something that, maybe I could have a couple employees and we'll be happy. We'll be
Yeah.
doing stuff we love doing.
Nothing wrong with that. I think that's the future, right? I think it's about people. What I hope last year, like we talked about, 2020, sort of like the wake
Yeah.
up call for everybody. And I just, there's a path for everybody. And I think, this is why, like, I love spending time. Like, as you know, I travel the world, and I'm
Yeah.
on the board of a very successful video gaming company, holding company in Ukraine. And I love spending time in that part of the world of like former Soviet Union, because like there's just this massive skepticism about anything the media talks about. There's this massive skepticism of what the government, which is good and bad, right? That works for and against them. But there's just so much more common sensical stuff, and they don't get
Sure.
too pulled too far on the either way. And I do think of just like the hype stuff, like that terrifies me. Of just like how, like,
Right.
last year, of just like how many big institutions just like really disappointed us last year, right? And
Yeah. That's true.
the conclusion I came to is like, wow, like, you got to take care of yourself and take care of family, and obviously your neighbors. But just like, you really can't, like, if you think the government and you think your country's going to take care of you, like, not really. You got to be a lot more,
Right.
you got to be thinking a little bit more of like, like me Inc., right? Like, like, just
Sure.
start up with
Self
me, as they
sufficient. Yeah.
say. Yeah,
Yeah.
much more self-sufficient on every front, right? Of just like, like I really do think, I hope that's the lesson. I'm not sure that's the lesson that people got, but I hope that should be the lesson that a lot of people have, where even if you are an employee and very, very happy, you probably should have some side hustles and side gigs, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just understanding sort of like that, your portfolio, like how are you building out your portfolio of investments, your portfolio of just
Right.
like skill sets, your portfolio of even income streams,
Yeah.
and really stop thinking about entrepreneurship as risky, because I've said this many times where it's like, okay, think about this, right? Like, which one is more risky? You are an employee of one income stream, or you are
Right.
like you are a consultant and you have like five customers. Like, which one is more risky?
That's right. Well, I always tell people it's like you're not going to fire you,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
like you're your boss. You're not going
yeah,
to fire you. You're going to work hard, and the harder you work, the more you make, which is really
yeah,
nice because when you're an
yep.
employee, as you know,
You're
it doesn't
capped.
matter. You're
Yeah,
capped. You're
you're
totally
capped.
capped. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You're either lucky and at a good company that's growing like crazy, and that's
Mhm.
not really all you,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep.
Or you're working really, really hard and the company's failing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, there goes my stock, there
Yeah.
goes my
Yeah.
bonuses,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm working really hard.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, so yeah, I tell people like, wouldn't it be better to be in control of your own destiny? And like you said, have multiple income streams and have passive income streams.
Yeah.
So it's like something happens, you get sick, or you want to go on vacation, you're still making money. It's kind of
Yeah,
nice. It's a good
super important.
thing.
I mean, I had a friend, and he worked for him for a period of time, and so he actually had like a very serious medical thing, so he couldn't come
Mm,
to work, right? So he was part time, but great guy. But I was really worried for him, like, are you
sure.
okay? And he's like, no, no, I'm totally fine, like, because like he had a side business that was doing like 10 to 15K a month to him,
Okay,
right? And
good.
I'm like,
Yeah.
awesome, like I didn't know that, makes me feel so much better, right? He's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, so I could actually go and like take care of like my
Oh, that's
medical stuff.
fantastic.
Oh, so and I was just like so happy to hear that. Like, just like really great. And I just like, that was a lesson to me. I'm like, wow,
Sure.
you don't know when these like, these medical things
That's right.
happen, like terrifying in the US.
Yeah, it is in the US, it's really terrifying.
Yeah,
Um, so let's talk a little bit more about how the world changed last year because
sure.
you saw this in probably your own life and probably people that you work with and coach, and
Yeah.
just the fact that the pandemic kind of shook us all up. And I think, like we were talking about earlier, kind of reawakened people to what do I really want? And what's really important for
Yep.
me?
Yep. I think like I said, we were in this bubble for a long time, right? Like just like, the SF Bay Area bubble, just like
Yeah.
everything's going up, salaries are going up, sort of job opportunities and business opportunities are going up, but also sort of like, frankly speaking, like just like the cost structure is going up,
Oh, totally
the
was. Yeah.
competitive level has gone up, the crime and the sort of
Yeah.
like weirdness in the city has gone up, and so
Yeah.
the quality of life was going down while everything is going up. But you just get so caught up in it, you don't think about this,
Sure.
right? Like, and so
Yeah.
I think that's what happened to many of us, and I was throwing myself into that even in 2018, 2019, particularly. I was just like caught up in all the craziness. And I think last year, which is like the great pause, right? Of just like, from
Mhm,
basically
mhm.
March, particularly the Bay Area, from March onwards through to, frankly speaking, the Bay Area has not come out of lockdown really until like sort of like March of this year. Like we were in lockdown for
That's
over a
right.
year.
Yeah.
And so just I think like this great pause of just like all of a sudden not having to commute, all of a sudden, just having time to think about it. I'm like, wow, do I really want to work at a company that just I'm just freaking selling ads, right? Like who cares?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
is this really like what I care about? And so I think that really forced a lot of people to sort of like, wow, I really don't want to do this. And so you are going to see a lot of like that's happening already. But I think, especially as a lot of the big companies like, no, you got to come into the office later on this year. I think you're going to see a ton of people like leave, and
Yep.
the folks who I think last year was a big wake up call for like, is this a lifestyle I want? Do I actually want to live here? So you saw tons of people leave California. What, we lost one or two seats?
It was the biggest exodus from California, I think, since there might have been like in the 70s there was a time I think when
Yeah,
people moved out,
yeah.
but it's the largest in decades. It's crazy.
Yes. We lost 2 seats. We lost 2
Yeah,
seats, if I
I don't
recall
know for
correctly.
sure. Did we
I'm
really?
I'm almost
I
positive.
haven't
Yeah,
been
I'm almost
keeping up with it.
positive. Yeah, yeah, I'm
Oh
I'm almost
man.
positive. I remember reading that, I'm like, "Oh, man, that sucks." But it's just like, that's an indication, right? Because your population goes down, you
Yeah,
have less representation in the
that's right.
in Congress. So you're like, "Yeah, I get it." And I think it's because people are like, "Wow, like, quality of life is awful, the lockdowns," and, I just don't mean to go into
Mhm.
politics, right? Like, I'm a centrist and Democrat and centrist, but just like, like the politics of just like how badly run California is on so many fronts. So lockdowns not
Right.
working, like all these things, and just
It
like,
felt pretty random. Yeah.
yeah, it felt pretty random and not very data or science based, and much more fear
Right.
based, right? And so just a lot of stuff that just, I think, really made people question sort of like the ROI of them spending time, of what they're doing,
Sure.
their job, where they live. So you saw a huge move of people all over the place, right? Like leaving the country, leaving the state. And so I think it forced a lot of people just like, I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life, or I don't want to be doing this at least for the next couple of years. I want to do something else. And so it's a wake
Right.
up call. It's a wake up call for many, in
Yeah.
myself included.
Yeah, I've been watching kind of the big players like Google and so forth, and I think even Microsoft and a few others. IBM just announced it, where they were going to pull people back into the office, and they said, "Okay, we're going to bring you back June, then it was July, then it was August, then September." And then I think what they found, because they probably talked to their employees and did a poll, is like, "Are you going to come back to the office? How do you feel about that?" And I think they found a lot of people were like, "I'm just going to
Yep.
quit then,
Yep. Yep.
because I don't want to come back to the office." And they reversed. They reversed. I know that that happened with Google. We're like, you know what? If you can work remote, go ahead and work
Yep.
remote.
Yep.
Just we want you to be close enough to come to the office once a month or something
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
But everybody's kind of reversing their really strict rule about we're going to bring you back into the office. The only one who hasn't yet,
I
I know
think,
Amazon's sticking to it, Apple's sticking
yeah.
to it because they're a
Yeah.
really expensive
Yeah.
campus, and
Yeah.
but it's yeah,
I
it's
think the
crazy.
ones to watch, not just even tech, I think it'll be really interesting to sort of see what happens with the East Coast banks, right? So a lot of them are like,
Oh,
nope,
good
you have
point.
to come back in
Yeah,
September. That's the one. That's the factor to watch. Where I'm just like, if they
right.
do, because I think they're going to hold to, either are they going to push us back, or they're going to stick to it. And I'm curious to sort of see how much their churn rate goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be interesting to watch in September, October.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. It's not all about Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes we get, I know I do, I get caught up in it too. Um, so I know it's definitely when we were talking about this online, how kind of what's been going on with, the remote work and with the pandemic and just everything we've been through from kind of our corporate lives and then having a little more time to think, that you've been re-examining much like I have, kind of your work-life balance and trying to be, more engaged with your family, taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
taking care of your health. What has that been like for you, and how have you refocused?
Yeah, it's been hard. It's been something I started seeing a therapist, which I recommend everyone should do, right? Like I'm a
Mm-hmm.
lot older now, and just sort of like just rethinking about sort of your lives, right? And so it
Yeah.
is interesting. I was talking to my therapist today, and just like I'm like, don't you think like trauma sort of like drives like a lot of change and thing? And
Oh,
and
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she's like, yes, but too much trauma is also bad too, right? Like a lot of those like homeless people on the street are like that all came from trauma. So it's just like how
Right.
you
Yeah.
channel that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is interesting where I'm looking back on sort of, like having time to think is really, really important. And that's something I still wrestle with, right? Like, even though
Sure.
I'm in the very, very fortunate position to sort of like be on the sabbatical or whatever, my calendars are still booked. And I'm just like, a lot of the time, like,
Mm.
why am I doing that? Right. Like, why am I scared of like an empty calendar?
Right.
And I think it's partly because of that training. I'm just like, no, your calendar needs to be full, because your calendar's not full.
Yeah.
You're not doing stuff and you're not validated, blah, 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 blah. Right. Like,
Sure.
and so I still wrestle with that as sort of like an immigrant, sort of like kid, and type A, like all that stuff. I'm still wrestling with it where I'm like, it's actually okay to do nothing every once in a while. It's okay to go
Right.
watch
Yeah.
Netflix, right? Like spend a day watching Netflix, especially if you can afford it. Like, why not? But this idea of just like, I'm trying to figure out that balance of just like, I don't want to be complacent.
Sure.
Right. And then so
Yeah.
I do worry about that. But at the same time, I also don't want to be like, wow, like why am I spending like, when I was at Yahoo, I was spending like 80 to 100
Oh,
hour weeks, right? Like, it's
oh man.
nuts.
Yeah, I never
Because
had
I
a
ran a
break. Yeah.
P&L, and I worked a lot of hours at 500, right? Just like
Mm-hmm.
80 to 90 hours. I was there
You were
like all
traveling
the
a
time,
lot.
and I was traveling all the
Yeah.
time. And I look back, I'm like, man, I have no regrets in my life. I try to follow sort of like, the Han, that character Han in Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. I love that character,
Oh yeah.
but it has this like he has this like great saying. It's just like he's like, like make decisions and move, and don't look back, right? But
Right.
I
Yeah.
have very little regret about anything. The one regret I have is just like missing just so much of my daughter's life, like just like when
Sure.
her growing
Yeah.
up. I was just like, what was I thinking? Like, she's never going to be that age again. And
Yeah.
so that's the
Yeah.
one regret. Everything else, loved. right? Like just like I think like almost everything else, but that to me, where you can never get that back.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Same with me. I missed a lot of my kids' kind of young life, and you don't get it
Yeah,
back. And it's when I was grinding at eBay and
yeah,
grinding at Yahoo, and
yeah.
it was a hard 8 years. I don't think I took a vacation for 8 years. So
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, it does make you start to question how to do things going forward,
Yeah.
which is
And
all we can do. Like you
yeah,
said, that's all you can do is look forward and say, how do I learn from that
how
and
to get
continue
better.
to adapt?
Yeah,
Yeah, how do I get better?
and trying to be like a lot more conscious of just like what I find, and maybe this is a Silicon Valley thing, or maybe not, but maybe the Silicon Valley, you're always future oriented, right? So just like you look back that you have regret, and you don't want to have regret. I try not to have too many
Sure.
regrets.
Yeah.
You look forward, you have anxiety, right? So you're always
Yeah. If
looking
you look too
forward of
far
like
away.
this, right? You're always
Yeah.
anxiety, and so it's just like I think that the idea of present, and everyone talks about like being more present,
Right. Right.
and I'm still working on that, right? Like trying. I do meditation every morning. That's helped a
Oh,
lot. I do
good. That's
meditation
great.
when I go sort of like go to bed before I go to bed. And one of the things that I'm trying to do much more frequently is like meditate in the middle of the day, right? Like 5-10 minutes just to bring
Just a little
things
bit.
down.
Okay.
I'm not succeeding, but it's something I've been like working at. And
Right.
trying to have a lot more like empty space in my calendar, and that's not really working really well. I still have a big portfolio, right? Like I still talk to a lot of my old portfolio companies from 500, so like I still care a lot about them, even though I'm not affiliated with 500 anymore.
Right.
It's just sort of I still care about them, so I still spend time with them. But like, it is
Sure.
one of those things of just like it's so easy to just sort of like fill up your calendar. You're like, okay, yeah, you say
Yeah.
yes, and just trying to say no a lot more. I'm
Yeah.
trying to work on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I am too. I'm trying to do more time blocking, kind of the Jack Dorsey
Yeah,
method of saying this afternoon's dedicated to this
yeah,
and stick with it and
yeah.
have time. Like Warren Buffett talks about this. He's
Empty
like,
calendar.
you're getting paid to think.
Yeah, yeah,
He's like, you need time to think and to strategize and just walk around the block and clear your head.
yeah,
And I've been very aware of every time I do that or I go for a run or whatever, which used to feel like, oh, I'm wasting time. I should
yeah,
be working. But every time I do that, I go for a run or I lift weights or whatever, I come back and I'm more creative.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
have
yeah,
new ideas. And so it's like, okay, it's an investment.
yeah, yeah,
That time is actually an investment because I'm not a machine.
yeah,
I have to recover and I have to figure out how to do my best work. And that does mean taking breaks like that. It really does.
yeah. Do-
So what's
You know,
next for
there's
you,
this like,
man?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, just to close off on this one, yeah,
Oh, sure.
I'm
Yeah,
just
go
to
ahead.
close off on this one, where just like on this idea of like having a resting ethic. I've been trying to exercise
Mhm.
this resting ethic, right? You have a work ethic, but I'm like, wait a minute, like we work all the time. We're like naturally oriented to sort of
Right.
be typing. Like that's actually not our problem, right? I actually the problem is actually sort of like having a resting ethic, and I recommend anyone who if you haven't read like Google like Housel, I believe it's Morgan Housel. He's a great writer about stuff, and he's with
Hmm.
Collaborative Fund, and he wrote this book of like not this book. He wrote this article about like how real work this day and age doesn't look like work, right? Like
Yeah, that's
reading the
true.
newspaper, taking a nap, going for a walk. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't look like work, but that's actually what
Yeah.
you're doing. And our mentality is so stuck in the industrial age. Like I have to
Right.
use my calendar. I have to be
Yep.
like cranking on the computer. I got to be doing something. But I'm like, yeah, but we're not making widgets. Like we're
Right.
thinking, and that's a different orientation. And by the way, you can't do more than 4 hours of real work a day anyways.
That's
And
right.
but
Yeah.
I'm having to break that. It's been really challenging. I still wrestle with this. I'm really wrestling with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wrestle with it with people around me too, because it's like you said, the work doesn't look like work.
Yeah,
And so you can literally be sitting in a chair outside looking up at the clouds and you're kind of thinking through a problem you're trying to solve. Or in my
yeah,
case,
yeah,
I'm often trying to think through the structure of an article I need to write.
yeah, yeah,
Somebody comes out like, "Oh, can you go do this? Can you do that? Run this errand?" It's like I'm actually working, even
yeah,
though it
yeah,
looks like I'm not
yeah, yeah, yeah.
working.
Eh,
And so it's hard for others too, because it doesn't look like the usual busy work where your hands are hammering the keyboard. That's true.
I wonder if that's a generational thing, and I wonder if this next
Could
generation
be.
will sort of like our kids. I wonder if they'll figure
Right.
it out, and I'm hoping that they'll figure this out because I think for us, being old dogs, of just like this is something I think I'm going to be
Yeah.
working on for a long time, just with my natural immigrant insecurity. It's like you should always be working, but I'm like, are
Yeah.
you really doing work? Right? Are you really doing work? And I'm not sure I
Yeah.
am. It's just you're just burning yourself out. Um,
Yeah. So I want to make sure people can find you. Where's
yeah.
the best place for people to locate you online?
Basically Twitter. So just like I'm at Marvin Liao, or I have a newsletter. Hardfork.substack.com is my
Fantastic.
newsletter, and so if people want to keep up with me, and obviously on LinkedIn and all that other stuff, but yeah, probably Twitter and the hardfork.substack.com is probably the best place
Cool.
to find me. And so I hope I answered all your questions.
Oh, you certainly did.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, this is exactly, I mean, the kind of stuff I want to talk about. It's
yeah,
like, it's the deep stuff where we're starting to look at our lives and re-examine work and saying, I think it's going to be very different going forward. I think I was telling somebody yesterday, I was like, we hit a tipping point. And initially everybody's like, yeah, 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 it's temporary. And I started another podcast last year where we were looking at this saying, I think this is forever.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think this is going to change work forever.
Yeah.
And I think it is.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that everyone feels like, not everybody, but at least in the US, a sense of like, okay, things will be back to normal soon. I don't think so. I actually,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the data seems to be pointing to the fact that we will, I think the world will be going in and out of lockdowns for the next like 1 to 2 years. Like, I think like
Yeah.
Delta variant, then there'll be like some
There's
whatever
another
E
variant, a
variant,
lambda
or yeah,
variant.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like, yeah. I just think like there are going to be more because we haven't
Yes.
eradicated this thing. So the
No.
reality is that we're going to be going in and out. And I think a lot of, like, just this is just what's going to happen. And so until we get everybody vaccinated, until we find some cure, something like, just like
Right.
we are going in and out. This is going to be our reality for the next couple of years, and
Yeah.
this will change everything. But I hope the renaissance will come out of this in the sense that people will be much more thoughtful and intentional about their lives, right? and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's hard. This is a hard thing, right? But with trauma, hopefully sort of like growth and change comes out of it. And let's hope that will be the silver lining.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
That's a good note to end on. Well,
Yeah.
Marvin, thank you for making time to talk with me today. It's been great catching up after a decade.
Yeah, way too long. Let's make sure it's not another decade.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you would like to follow upcoming releases of the show, please subscribe. And as always, I appreciate your ratings and reviews. Thank you. If you would like to learn more about Invincible Career and the podcast, you can visit invinciblecareer.com. Until next time, I wish you the best of luck in becoming an opportunity magnet for the best things in life.